All right, hold on. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Passion for Purpose Up Close and Personal podcast with your host, Dr. Darryl L. Jones. And today I have with me the Reverend Teres Broughton. And you got to hear what we got to talk about today, because we're going to talk about some things that gonna blow your mind, some stuff that needs to be talked about, and some stuff that you don't hear, especially in the African-American church. Reverend Teres Broughton, she's a sexual ethicist, she's a womanist, and in addition to that, she's a child of God, and she's a person with so much talent and skill in her profession, and I just can't wait to discuss this podcast with you. So tell us, who is the Reverend Teres Broughton?
Oh, wow. Look at you, Dr. Darryl. First of all, the Reverend Teres Broughton is someone who is extremely happy and humbled to have this conversation with you. Second, I am an itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I have been in ministry for probably about 15 years. Prior to that, I had a group home for women, and I am particularly thrilled to have this conversation because it's a lot happening in the world.
It is. And it was so interesting because it was amazing. Like we shared earlier, God has a way of bringing people together that you just never know. And you think about the different ties that we have and the path that we travel that coming so close together. And as I shared with you, you being a sexual ethicist caught my attention because I never described myself as that, but it caught my attention because it was part of my dissertation that I wrote some years ago. So I said, I know we're getting ready to talk about some sexual concepts, some sexual theology, and go talk about it from a perspective that's just broader than what you might hear on a TV talk show. It's something that has been researched by some professionals, and unfortunately, not too many African Americans, with the exception of Kelly Brown Douglas, whose name I could just call off the top of my name. I can't think of another one right off. So, it's a field that's very wide open, but African Americans don't get that too much. And I understand why, because of the drawback from the African American church.
Right, absolutely. We want to judge folks instead of facing the ineffectiveness and misinformation that we have provided them. Yeah. If you see a girl walking down the street, with a mini skirt on and stilettos and, lipstick, and she just smacking and twisting, you're going to make a particular assumption about her. And you're going to say, oh, where's her parents, right? Yeah. But then if I turn my fingers back and I say, but you are her parents. Yeah. She was your responsibility. Then how is that going to make you feel, right? So this is what church is. And this is church's relationship with sex and sexuality. We know that people get married in the church. We tell them that, sex is only for marriage. We recognize the spiritual connotations of sex and sexuality, yet we don't want to talk about it. That's where we become hypocritical, and that's where a lot of the problems are on our hands.
And you're right. Sex, even though we look at it from a physical perspective, it's probably more so spiritual. And we don't want to tie that together with it, because when we think spiritual, we want to think more holiness and not intimately. So it's so amazing to me. But what else would you rather learn about sex than from your faith leaders, from your church community? Church is supposed to be a safe space where you talk about things that affect us in life. And I can't think of one thing that affects most people in life than sex.
Right. When we look at sex, we're talking about not only the sex act, but Dr. Darryl, we're looking at sex, sexuality, and sexism. And all that deals with gender, identity, parenting, romance, even abortion. You know what I'm saying? All of this, everything from the institutions that promulgate sexist ideologies, like the church. You know what I'm saying? All of these things are things that we as spirit people and conscientious, progressive, African-centered people need to be ready to tackle.
I agree. And, and also, it's so disappointing to find out that the place you expect to learn this much information is not taught there. I shared with you earlier how when I was working on my dissertation about this, I had programs set up in my church, and I had a workshop where I had pastors and leaders from other churches come out, and we did workshop talking about safe sex, abstinence, STDs, infidelity, polygamy, all these other things that happen.
Man, that's good stuff, man.
And what's the thought behind all this? How did we get here? And, you know, it was just so amazing. And I think it would have probably been different if I would have did my dissertation on an African-American university campus, but I did my dissertation on a campus, I'm just gonna call it out. It was Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is known to be a very conservative school. And what was so interesting too, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, I was told I was the first African-American in my doctoral program at Liberty University. There was a couple more came in with me. I'm not sure the total accuracy of it, but I believe that because that's what was told to me by one of the leaders there. But they had no idea that's what I was going to be talking about in my dissertation when I first enrolled in that program. So it was just a whole interesting phenomenon for me. But,
you know what? I bet you could write a dissertation on the process of you writing your dissertation.
What you talking about? What you talking about? You know, and what was so interesting, I went to, we both products of the ITC. So I was so prepared in my writing from the ITC that the writing wasn't the hard part, it was the content, and getting information on the content was the hardest part.
Yeah, and just like we talked about at that time, I think it was only Kelly Brown Douglas. You know what I'm saying? But what I like to do is, you know, I bring in the other names. I bring in the Shanika Walker Barnes. I bring in people who actually deal with sexism and the internalizing of sexist, you know, these sexist ideologies.
Yeah.
So my range is a whole lot more broad, and I am happy to be able to engage your work in my final project. That's gonna be fun.
And I'm excited about this. And you know, what's so interesting, a lot of times, if we were to understand sex from a theological perspective, we might be able to eliminate a lot of the perversion that comes with sexuality.
Seriously, I'm using Kierkegaard. Yeah. You know, really, because we have to remember that as spirit beings, and I always want to go back to this because, you know, I'm in a very hierarchical, politically structured denomination, the AME Church, you know, but I always want to remember, you know, going back to E.T. Hart-Touré, Dr. E.T. Hart-Touré, remember, bring in the knowing that we together are all spirit beings, and that is our primary responsibility, is to be the best spirits that we can be. And then we'll wind up becoming good African descendant people who care about culture. You know what I'm saying? Who good humans who care about the grass and the dirt and the roaches and the rats. Like we will wind up being those things naturally if we see ourselves as spirit beings.
But you know, I think the beauty of it also is we're kind of afraid to look at it. It's almost like there was a movie a long time ago called The Wizard of Oz that I like to draw from, and how disappointing it was when they were able to pull the curtain back and see what happened. And we don't want to pull the curtain back on sexuality from a theological perspective, nor from a spiritual perspective.
We don't. We'll spiritualize it and say, oh, that it was the devil, although it was lust. Yeah. But we won't say, you know, I haven't done the proper shadow work. I haven't had the proper therapy. Psychologically, my manhood is contingent on how many women I can take down. Mm-hmm. Psychologically, my womanhood is contingent on how many men I can take. These are real issues that we deal with in our community, and our inability to discuss them is leaving us, you know, let's say how to say, the people perish for lack of knowledge. It's leaving us in a real bad situation. I mean, look at what we're fighting now. Look at the ideologies that we're fighting. Look at this thing that's going on with our brother who transitioned, Kevin Samuels. Yeah. You know, these are conversations that if we were already having in the church, when he came about, we would have been able to say, okay, we already see what that is. Yeah. And, you know, and I think the thing is, if we go back to when we first discovered sexuality as a kid, you know, I share
I ain't gonna say I share often, but I've shared on occasions. My first introduction to what sexuality was all about came through magazines as a little kid. You know, I'm a little boy and I had uncles and older cousins, older uncles and friends. And you know how as little boys, we found a little magazine and we'll look at it and point to it. And, you know, we're like, oh, what's that? And, you know, get excited and everything. And growing up, I grew up in a church as well. So growing up in the church, we were taught that sex is a thing that you don't do until you get married. But how many people actually wait till you get married to actually get engaged in sex? And those who say, and we lie about it, you know, we lie about it too in the church. So, you know, it's just so much that happened with that. It is. It
makes no sense. Here's the thing. How can we develop into well, healthy sexual beings if our development is not aided with proper sexual development information? You know what I'm saying? Like we don't start, you know, sex doesn't begin with the sex act. It begins with you identifying, even, you know, as a female or male, identifying what gender you're going to subscribe to. And let me be clear, gender is not, you know, just this black and white, or shall I say this pink and blue situation. You know, we understand gender to be more of a spectrum. Okay. And you have masculine women, you have feminine men, you have people in between. And generally what we find is that folks that balance out get together. So whether that is two men or whether that is two women or a woman and a man, look, even heterosexual couples, do you ever see a very outspoken and boisterous one of them, and then the other one is outspoken and boisterous? No. It's not like that. So we look at God. God is balance. God is truth. God is justice, right? So we're looking at God as balance, then we can then see God in these relationships.
That's true.
But if we don't teach it in the right way, then people are going to be pointing fingers. Yeah. And here's the thing, the little boy that's 5 years old, that's 6 and 7, growing up in church, and he's singing in the choir. And then as soon as he gets 14 and 15, and you obviously see that he's attracted to the same sex, why is he then ousted? Why is he then without a support system? What is going on with us as spirit beings that we are okay with this type of judgment?
And we shouldn't be. And, you know, if you think about it too, there's so many dynamics that go on and I can only speak from the African-American church perspective, but there's just so much. And I remember again, growing up, you know, it's amazing how kids, we hear adult conversation, even though we might not understand it at the time. As we get old and we reflect back on, we're like, so this is what they were talking about. And I remember hearing conversation about kids looking like somebody who wasn't their father in the church, some other man in the church, some man with somebody who's not his wife, and how they would look at each other from the choir stand to the congregation and vice versa and things like that. And
now you're talking, you're right. Exactly. We're shifting from this conversation about, you know, having sugar in the tank, right? To now even dealing with children's development in the church, psychological development of children in the church. Think about all of these people who were deemed illegitimate. That grew up in the church, whose parent, whatever, if it was the mom or the father, because we're not gonna, you know, whoever it was that stayed in the church just on sheer GP, that I ain't going nowhere and I've been at this church X amount of years and you ain't gonna leave me, and my sexual sin, I'm gonna have this baby around everybody. You know what I'm saying? These are instances that really happen. And more than that, these are things that shift the psychology of who we see ourselves as little Black children growing up in church. You know, I'm better than her because I got two parents, you know what I'm saying? Or I'm better than him because he's a product of deacon such and such. And you know what I mean?
And we start judging one another. We start discriminating against one another. And we never even pay attention to what caused that urge, you know, because where the urge come from? How did you know, how did your body and mind know to respond to that? Because I'm in a place today that I'm trying to be better at meeting people. And what happened is Now, it used to be a time that men and women shouldn't be allowed to talk to each other if that's not your wife or that's not your husband. And we have to understand that there's so much God has available for us if we can get past the urge of sexuality, thinking that he wants me sexually, or I want her sexually, he wants me sexually. And it used to be a time that men and women could never work together because one of them either became attracted to the other, or they were afraid sexually of something that might happen. And now we have to realize we got to push past that. There have been people that I talk to often. I said, we got to learn how to move past sexual attraction to do what God will have us do, because there's so much that we can do in life if we can just get sexual attraction out the way and find out what caused that sexual attraction, work through it, and don't let it destroy you, and do what God wants us to do in spite of that sexual attraction, or even because of the sexual attraction.
My God. Now, see, you talking that good talk today. You know what? You knew how to get me ready to talk on the phone today. You knew how to because here's the thing. Right. When we talk about sex as a spiritual experience, then what does that say? Going back to your phrasing, what about that spiritual experience are you yearning? And what does that mean to you? Exactly. If we could really talk about sex as a form of spiritual worship, right? If we could talk about sex in a pneumatological perspective, wouldn't we at this point be so much better at it? Right? Think about the things that you started doing when you were young. When you know, if I don't care what it is, if you started as a teenager or a young adult with the information and trying to get a grasp on it, wouldn't by the time you got, you know, later on, you would have the understanding of how to not only know its origin, but you would see yourself in relation to your own sexual wellness, your own sexual desires, and how to go about managing them.
You would think that would be what we are today based off the information that's been made available. But again, one thing, and it's so unfortunate about our culture will not read. You will not read.
But you know what? Here's the thing.
Yeah.
We've had conversation about this, but I'm going to challenge you to shift your. I'm gonna challenge you to shift your language, because there's something new happening. There's something new happening in the earth. Even though when you did your dissertation, it was 2011, right? Yeah. And there weren't many people who were open to having the conversation. There wasn't much research, you know, besides just a handful of folks.
Yeah.
This environment, this season, Ecclesiastes deal with things in season. We're not in that season. We're in an awakened season. We're in a season where people are reading, even if it's just a flyer on TikTok, brother.
That's true, yeah.
People are getting exposed to information, whether it's opening up a book or a video. This day and age, and so please know, you can rest assured, because of the work that you've done, okay, and you've been in ministry all these years, right? That thing is coming to a head, and it's almost a thing of the past.
When I say I'm so excited right now, just having this conversation about this, it is amazing.
Because think about it now. Look, let's go to Kevin Samuels, and and God bless him and God bless his family. And we are learning as we go along how to deal with, pockets of our community that have been sexually offended, pockets of our community that have been abused, people who have been victims, and those who have been perpetrators. We're now learning how to embrace each person from where they are in the cycle of sexual wellness. And this courage, and here's the thing, we're being forced to. We're being forced to. Because of all the sex scandals and all of the, wayward ideologies and the toxic masculinity, we are being forced to have to deal with it. And I am going to even say, I thank God for the brother Kevin Samuels, because I'm going to say this, as a womanist, who else was going to give us that candid, real-time ownership of such toxic masculinity?
That's true.
Who was doing that? You know what I mean? He was honest. and he was forthright, and he was what I consider to be the mayor of misogynoir, okay?
Yeah.
But he was also very necessary.
Yeah.
Because we understand that people who are bitter, people who feel left out, people who have, been rubbed the wrong way, they take to these toxic theologies and masculinity, notions of masculinity. They take to it and they stay there. But that is a basic level. That is an animalistic level. That is a lower level of who we are as people. There are men who have and continue to evolve beyond that animalistic place that Kevin Samuels was highlighting.
Yeah.
All of us aren't there, but there are many of us that are stuck there. So without us being able to see that, okay, there's 1.5 million people who are actually feeling this, without us being able to see our lower selves,
yeah,
then how could we have challenged us to be better? You know what I mean? This is what it is.
And we need people like him, not necessarily him, but we need people who don't mind being the villain when it comes to getting the message out, what needs to be communicated. And the funny thing about the whole Kevin Samuel, he was able to survive a council culture because of what he said and what he did. He didn't care about being counseled. He just communicated what he felt was in him. And, to be honest, I had no idea who he was. I found out about him in death when he died. I had heard the name, but I didn't, I'm like, I hear a lot of names. So
right.
As a matter of fact, I thought he was a pastor out in Stone Mountain, because I think it was Kenneth Samuel who pastored the big church out in Stone Mountain.
That's right. That's right.
So when I would see his name, I just thought, oh, he just a pastor, maybe on staff out there at Kenneth Samuel Church or something. Didn't really care that much about it. But after all this have come out, I'm like, okay, I need to find out what was part of the motivation, not necessarily what all he said and what all he did, but what drove that. And that's what we have, that's what we are right now. There are things that drive us to do things that might be unpopular, but needed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, and see with him, and what I don't like is how people are comparing him to Jamal Bryant. I think that's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
This brother Samuels, is a person who he believed in what he was saying. He believed that this was the standard that people accepted. And so therefore, this is what we needed to abide by. Mm-hmm. He just laid it out like that. Whereas someone else would say, someone who is fleeing from and trying to purge themselves from these ideas of toxic masculinity, that person would say, okay, we have to challenge ourselves to be someone different than that. Yeah. We cannot allow for ourselves to be stuck being there. We have to reach beyond that and be somebody that God has called and ordained and has given authority to. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's the conversation. And I think that people are missing what's really being said in criticizing the fact that there was a sermon done after somebody passed away. I just think that we're in a real dangerous area when we start criticizing the pastoral care that a pastor is providing to his congregation.
Yes. And, and I think if we had a course, course major in seminary covering sexual education, sexual theology would be a better course topic for it. You'll be surprised how eventually it would make its way to the pulpits. I remember going back to when I was going through the dissertation process, writing. My congregation probably got so tired of hearing sexual-laced sermons because, I started preaching about it. I was teaching about it in Bible study. A lot of my conversation would be, and, I know they probably got tired of it for a while. And I have to say the core who stayed with me through that time, I praise God for them because, but the thing is, I had to kind of indoctrinate myself in that during that period of time because I needed to feel it. I needed to know what it was because I needed that to write with. And then after it was over with, I felt like it has laid dormant all these years. I'm like, man, I wonder what's going to come of this dissertation. Because like I told you earlier, I don't discuss it much anymore. People don't seem interested in it. So it's just a book on my shelf now. And every now and then I'll go through it and pull out some stuff and tweet it or post it or something like that, just to kind of stay fresh of it. But that was a time I actually knew that whole dissertation by memory. And now I don't have it.
And listen, brother, look, I'm not trying to be funny, but there's been someone in the profession has passed. Yeah. And it might be room for someone who is educated and did a whole dissertation on it, and also a Black man, you know, to be able to speak to it. Someone who has actually studied it from more than one perspective. That is very necessary.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what might end up happening. You know, you just never know how God opened up doors. This might, you and I discussing this right now, might lead to another podcast or some type of thing where we come on and do maybe once a week or so often, and we discuss this and open it up to pastors to either text in, tweet in, or whatever.
Let's do it. You know, I do a weekly podcast which is on hiatus right now, but I do a weekly podcast called Sex in the Church.
Oh, wow.
And I would absolutely love for you to come on. Now that I have relocated, we're gonna reconnect on that. Give me about a month.
Great. That would be great. And you know, you just never know, because to me, sexual spirituality is just as much a part of the Christian community as all the other forms that we communicate and we practice as Christian people. And
it definitely is. It definitely is. I remember Reverend Dr. Willie Gottman. You remember Willie Gottman?
I know.
Y'all probably called him Goodman.
But you know, it's funny because I was at ITC. He wasn't there when I came up. I learned about him later on. But I'll tell you one of the regrets I have about ITC, that I didn't get a chance to take Old Testament from Dr. Randall Bailey. I took Dr. Mafiko, who I really loved and enjoyed his teaching, and I learned so much. But I think Dr. Bailey could have really spoke to what I was getting ready to prepare myself for as writing this dissertation in.
Right. I took Bailey. I did.
I can imagine your
Bailey. I took Mafiko and Bailey and Dr. Gottman. I took Sex and Spirituality, everything that I was, you know, I took all the womanist classes, everything that was even close to, because at the time I was going through a divorce, and I was also dealing with, you know, intimate violence. I was really wanting to learn more about what causes women to put ourselves in harm, and all of the layers of why this takes place. And then I ran into this notion of male validation, right, early on. And I mean, just all of this, these notions that were not useful. Yeah. And if I knew about them when I had the group home, you know, there was so much that I really felt like I could have done. And so my ministry and context was surrounded around going to those people who others considered to be the least of these, who, you know, I was in the strip clubs, I was at the bars, I was on the street corner, I was in the beauty shops, I was with the people who everybody said, you know, they're not professionals, you know, they're not theologians, you know, they're, you know, street folks.
Yeah.
That's whose divinity I wanted to highlight.
Okay. And you know, it's an area that's really needed, because a lot of times there's so much information and knowledge and wisdom there that is untapped, because first of all, we don't even look them in the eye, let alone try to have a conversation with them as a faith community in large.
Right.
You know, we'll feed them, but we won't look in the eye. We won't even ask their names. We won't ask their experience. I remember once, I share the story often. I was at Busy Bee, one of my favorites. I don't get to go there too often, but I was at Busy Bee one day, and a guy was standing outside, and he asked me, could I give him a couple of dollars to buy him something to eat? And I looked at him. I said, I tell you what, come inside and eat with me. He said, no, they won't let me come inside. I said, you're my guest. They will let you inside. They let me inside. They're gonna let you inside. So he came inside, he sat at the table with me, and we ate. And I got to ask him his name, where he's from, and all kind of stuff. I learned more from him in that 30-minute lunch than I did in a lot of books that I've read about what it's like to actually see ministry from the eyes of someone who needs it.
Yes, goodness. Yeah. And that was the success behind my seminary journey. It was also the most debilitating because I wound up putting myself in a position where I was easily discriminated against. Mm-hmm. You know, I was known as the sex girl in a sense. And so it was like, oh, that's a preacher to talk about sex. Or, you know, people didn't want to be seen with me. Men, professors didn't want to be seen with me. I had, there were people who actually said, well, you know, don't take a picture of me because I don't know you know what I'm saying? It was just so much discrimination, just because I chose to deal with the issues of sex, sexuality, and sexism. And I mean, I've had colleagues that say, well, how is studying to be a whole part of ministry? You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that I had to deal with in seminary. And so the toxicity of the preachers, the toxicity of the ministry leaders just took me back to growing up as a child, to the many stories that I heard. At this point, I have collected 1,092 stories of sexual abuse and mishandling in the church.
Wow.
So it's a huge weight, and it is a passion for me to make certain that all of those wrongs are somehow righted.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and it's needed. And, you know, I think about that. What year did you start ITC?
I started in 12.
In 12. Okay. And so you might know this person I'm getting ready to bring up, but I had a friend, was a friend of my wife and I named Yvette Asim. You ever heard of her? I think she graduated in probably 11 or 12. Okay. But anyway, she's very well known on campus, and our professors still know her. She passed about a year or so ago, but her whole thing was about the womanist touch, and she used the sexual. I got a lot of information from her about different forms of the sexual spirituality. She gave me a book about queer theology that I had never heard of, and she gave me a lot of other reference stuff that she had studied. And her and
I probably know her. I'm sure I probably know her face. I'm just not knowing the name, but I'm sure I know her. There's no way I don't know her.
Yeah, similar in complexion. She had a little short blonde afro, and you would know her probably. But she's a very powerful girl. Her and Jackie Pinkney Kaufman. My wife. So you might know my wife, Tisa Jones. But all of them at ITC, they came out around that time. But the thing about it is, there's a movement going on now that's stirring up with Kevin Samuels, what you're doing, and probably some other people that we don't know by name yet. But it's getting ready to be a movement going through the church that we're going to have to address this issue. You got what's the he, she, her, and the him, his, and
the pronouns, right?
Yeah, the pronouns and things like that.
And do you know how reluctant church folks are to using proper pronouns?
Yeah.
Do you know how reluctant we are to even wanting to honor people's gender? We want to scientifically, you know, devalue your perception of who you are. And that's not our place.
Yeah.
We have to understand that gender is a socially constructed, you know, figment of imagination. And so if someone operates within or in between the categories, they're still God chosen, and they're still very human, and their desires and their wants and needs to be validated and loved are still very human and spiritual.
And it's real to all of those who experience that. I'm not sure if I was taught this, or if I caught this at ITC, but a lot of my practice is to try to avoid pronouns. I try to avoid pronouns at all costs if I can. And I learned that because of how we relate to God.
To God.
You know, when they start talking about God, how we know he's him and how we know it's not her and she. So I try to call whatever it is, what it is. If you're a person, I try to address you by name as opposed to him or her, or, you know, because that way I feel like I can avoid a lot of stuff that I don't have to deal with.
I hear you, brother. You know, it's so funny because it was not until I got to ITC that I freely heard God referred to as a she. Yeah. I never, ever heard God referred to as a she before I stepped into the Interdenominational Theological Center. Yeah. And I mean, that changed my I mean, that shifted all of the furniture in my mind.
I can imagine.
Right? Because now here's the thing. And that's what people think that womanism is. They think that womanism is just a group of people that call God she or see God as a woman, and that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Every person that wrote in the Bible that referred to God as he was a he.
Yeah.
Yet we are the church that wants to highlight the divinity in each person. Mm-hmm. So to unlock my mind and to just think that God could be a she, and take it one step further, that God could be the perfect version of me. Now, see, now we start to make some change, right? Because if God is the perfect version of me, then I live a life of limitless possibilities.
That's true.
If God is the reflection of the perfect version of me, then I have a social responsibility to everything around me, every person around me. You know what I'm saying? This starts to put it into the right perspective. And so it's more than just the gender God. It's more than a he, she God. No, it's a me God. And it is the freedom and liberation to define the me God and to testify of the me God.
Yeah. And you think about it from that perspective, when God created the world, and he created male and female, both he made. But if you think about that, God we never found a label of what God was. And we're trying to use our lenses from 2022 and go back, as opposed to going all the way to the beginning and coming back forward. And we can't do that. We can't do it. And so we are left with all these misconceptions of how we see God, how we see each other, and how we see ourselves. You know, if we're honest, we all have the X and the Y chromosome in us. So, you know, that should tell us something right there. And like you said, we look for balance. You know, if you got a loud man, chances are there's a quiet woman. If there's a loud woman, chances are she's with a quiet man or something like that. You know, there's balance that we search for in life. And even going back to, I wish I would knew more about him, but I'm gonna have to find out more about him eventually, Brother Kevin Samuels. I would love to know now more about what got him going and how he was able to build, and who's gonna pick it up now and go forward with it, but not as villainized as he was, but hopefully someone could see what he did and say, okay, maybe we don't have to villainize this anymore. Maybe we can get more understanding of what he was probably trying to get out here.
Yeah, I think the reason why he was villainized, and you know what, I'm not even gonna say he was villainized.
Yeah.
Because here's the reason. The reason why I'm not gonna agree that he was villainized is because that would take some of the responsibility away. The responsibility of him having legitimately hurt people's feelings.
Yeah.
You know, the things that he said and the things that he held up, that he heralded as truth, were extremely debasing and traumatizing even to so many Black women. And so I can't say that he was villainized, but what I am going to say is that he was seen as a villain because he embodied, or at least to us, he portrayed that he embodied those ideologies.
That's true.
He took ownership of these ideologies. And so that would actually make him the villain. You know what I'm saying? It would, but it wasn't
like he was an actor and you had to separate the two.
Right. So but the fact that he took ownership of them does not negate him from being a hero as it relates to opening our eyes. That's true. So he definitely opened our eyes. He was definitely necessary. He showed us the ugly side of who we are. He showed us what generations and generations of not discussing sex, sexuality, and sexism in the church has done. It has people just as negative and toxic as they want to, pretending to be better than everyone else. And this is what we did. We created Kevin Samuels. And that's the point I'm making.
And I like that point too. And I often wonder now, after hearing you say that, which was a great point, what would have been the impact if he would have been another race making those same claims?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if he, let's put him as a white man saying
that.
We would have hurt that man. He would have we would have hurt that man. You know what I'm saying? But he's ours.
He was ours, and he could have been either one of our brothers, uncles, dad, cousin, anything like that. So that's what made it so, and that's what made it so intense in our community. And
you know what intensified it? Mm-hmm. The fact that when he passed, mm-hmm. it reminded us that he is somebody's brother. He is somebody's cousin. He is somebody's father. You know what I'm saying? Our response, okay, so because let's look at this. Mm-hmm. Him passing away is very similar to, and I'm going to compare it to my molester, right? Okay. The man that molested me at age 14, mm-hmm. he was the captain of the police department. Mm-hmm. Now, I had to go back and say that it didn't happen and so that he wouldn't go to jail. Okay. So now, when he passes away, I'm in my 30s, but I don't know how to feel about it because there's so many mixed emotions. He passed away, and he's the first Black, captain of the police force in my city, but I never got an apology. Mm-hmm. You passed away with me still holding that scarlet letter of being the person that aggressed you as a teenage girl. Mm-hmm. You passed away without vindicating me. Yeah. And it hurt. And so you have to think about when Kevin Samuels passed away, he left so many women hurt. Yeah. He passed away without a change of heart, without an apology. He passed away like that was the legit word and had 1.5 million people following him. Yeah. Okay, so this has an effect on these women that were the leftover women. And so when Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant chose to, as a pastor of one of the largest churches here in Atlanta, dealing with all these same Black women that's hurt, okay, mm-hmm. when he chose to discuss it in his sermon, in the preaching moment, to take time to be a voice, lending voice for the pastoral care of those women who were hurt, now he's criticized and had come back and apologized. I saw that. Right? Because now we're recognizing how this has affected all of us. Mm-hmm. All of us. So, and here's the thing. Omarion owes him an apology. Yeah. No, seriously. Yeah. We cannot allow people just in any branch of society, anywhere, to start criticizing the Black pastor and censoring what he says to his congregants. It's a very gray area, a delicate area. It's tricky when you start doing that. That's true. Very tricky. And it's not right. It's not right as professionals that have gone to school, that have, we are professional clergy, that someone from the outside can come and criticize us and no other clergy say, hey, that's his jurisdiction. That's problematic and that's scary because first it's going to be Jamal Bryant, but next it'll be me and you. Yeah, because you start the pecking order. You say, you shoot, like you remember growing up, they say you go and hit the bullet and won't nobody else bother you. So now they hit Jamal, the rest of us start running into our corners. Right, so, right. That it happens like that. And when you were saying that, it made me think about something. There's a word that I learned from Dr. Carolyn McCrary, and I'm sure the word had been around for a long time, but the word was called muddle. And she told us sometimes you have to just muddle things. You might not get a closure. You might not get an apology. You might not get forgiveness from that person, and you just have to muddle your way through it. And I didn't like the word when she said it then, because what happened was, she said a lot of times we don't let people get stuff out of them. And she said we are too quick to hand somebody a napkin, tissue. She said you have to let people get that stuff out of them. You have to let them go through the ugly cries, because if you start stifling the sniffles, it'll start coming out too slow and it'll never get out the way it should get out.
And that's what's happening
That's
now.
Pastor Care at its best, baby. That's Pastor Care at its best. I mean, and you got it from the mother. You got it from the mother. And this is the point I'm making. You think about it. These are thousands of women that were hurt. And just like when my molester died, it triggered the trauma all over again.
I'm sure.
So this is a pastor addressing his congregants, addressing his hurt congregants. And I know that in this post, pandemic society where everything's on the internet and you feel like it's relevant to you, and you know what I'm saying? But that really wasn't your business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That wasn't your business. That was their business. That was the people in that congregation. And the women who were wailing. Did you see the video? Those women were wailing. They got a release. They got a release at that moment that we could even see over the internet.
Yeah.
So it's very unfair to me that we as clergy did not stand up, not behind him, but behind the point.
Yeah. And I have that same issue, not only with what Pastor Brian said, but when any of us say anything that gets traction, there'll always be somebody want to jump on the other side of it and feel offended by it. And my problem is the word of God is a sword. It's gonna cut you. It's gonna cut you either coming in or coming out. So
and it cut us first. That's what they don't get. It cut us first.
It's gonna cut you. And when it cut, yes, you go holler, yes, you go be in pain, but there's a bomb in Gilead, and everything, we got to quit getting so offended by it. I've never understood this society right here. There's a word that I say, I'll tell you off camera that I use to describe this. No, I can edit this out. I'll tell you the word now, and hopefully I remember to edit it out. It's called the what happened? Okay, it's called the virginification of our American society, and I made that word up. So and and I said we are so. It's unreal how we respond to so many things, because me even saying that word, people probably get offended by that, especially me being a pastor saying that word. But if you think about what that really says, that the root word of that word I just gave is one of the most powerful tools in the world, if not the most powerful tool, next to maybe prayer, faith, and hope. Because the thing that comes out of it, what wants to go in it, and what it signifies and what it stands for. So we are left. Amen. They having to realize that we don't know it all, and sometimes we can't be afraid to learn something new or something more intense than what we already knew. Right.
And see, and also I like that. Yes, I totally agree. Oh yeah. Well, I could have took that a lot of different ways, because what essentially you're saying is that if we don't get a hold of what's going on right now, we're not going to be able to access all that we can access as people of God.
Yes.
And that's pretty much, that's how I take what you're saying.
Yeah. And that's it exactly. We have to get to a point of when you really trust in God, we have to realize that God sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. He sees it all. And I believe he can see it all at the same time. And that's just my belief in God. So me knowing that God knows what I need for the hurt that happened to me. God knows what I need to keep me, that thorn in the side to keep me from exalting myself above him. And we have so much that's going on in life, and going back to the whole origin of how we even got into letting sex be an interest for us to want to research it and see what is it about it that caused so many wars, so many families to be destroyed, so many people to get hurt and destroyed over it.
It's very powerful. And I said that to someone. I said, if you were how they begin on, what is that? Where do people get on the bull?
Yeah.
And it just, you can't do nothing with it. You know what I mean? But those who learn how to ride it know how to stay on it.
Yeah.
They know how to navigate it. They know how to control it.
Yeah.
And that is our relationship as a people, our cultural relationship with sex, sexuality, and sexism. We need to be all over that thing to the point where we know where it's going, when it's going, how fast it's going, how slow it's going, and how to stop it.
Can you imagine if we could ever come to grips with that? We would be so empowered as people that we won't yield to things that we're yielding to. We won't give in to things that we give into because we understand the thought, the theology, the spirit behind and in what it is that is necessarily trying to control it.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And we're on our way. My goal is for the little girl that has a period, as soon as she has her period, for her to be able to understand sex and spirituality from this just the standpoint of her period, for her to be able to go to the church and have somebody at the church give her real information about spiritually what has happened and what this signifies. Not just, okay, don't get pregnant. Okay, now you can get pregnant. No. That's a very surface level conversation. And we as Black women, they say we got Black girl magic. We as those women, these magical beings, if you will, have to get the proper nurturing of who we are as spirit beings as it relates to our sexuality. And I promise you, if people were able to really teach your spirituality based on who you are in God, your gender, who you are in the spectrum of God, and your desires and your lineage, all of that deals with sexuality.
It does.
When we go into Matthew, and the first thing in Matthew say, well, Jesus came down 42 generations and this person begot this person begot this. All of that is your sexual identity, your history. Okay? All of that. And so if we were really able to educate our boys and our girls of who they were based on the intimacy of who God created them to be, a lot of this mess would be going on.
And we hadn't even talked about the relationship with what we call sex and love, and how love supposedly tied to sex or sex supposedly tied to love. Because if you think about it, going back to something you said earlier, we were taught growing up, you don't have sex till you get married. So people want to get married so they can have sex. If you were to take that equation out of it, most people wouldn't get married.
You know what? You're talking. Listen, because we strive so greatly to want to look like we're blessed, instead of really being blessed, instead of working on our spirits and becoming who God wanted us to be, we deal with trying to show up as how we think people think God being is supposed to look like. So that lends itself to, okay, I'm about to graduate. Let me hurry up and get a wife. That lends itself to, I do got these urges. Let me go ahead on a couple up with this person. It lends to that because we don't know what the point, because we don't know who we are. We don't know what the point of us coupling with somebody could be.
And you think about that when we do couple with people and say sex get introduced before you marry that person. Now you're in love. Are you really in love or are you in lust?
You're physically, well, the Bible says too. Well, and here's the thing. The Bible says the two shall become one, right?
Right.
And we say, you got to be married, but doesn't that take place? Doesn't that oneness take place before you even jump the broom, if you will? So when two people are copulating, we began to see a similarity develop. Okay, even if it's what you call your sneaky link. There will be Look, they ain't nothing you can't go nowhere without leaving something, and you can't leave without taking something with you, right? And especially when we talk about the spiritual copulation of sex. You're entering the astral plane of somebody else. You're entering the quantum field of someone else. And so there you can't rinse that off.
That's true. I don't care what type shower you in, how big the water head is and all that stuff. That's a part of your DNA now.
And back to your point, what in me, because see, I love it. What in me makes me attracted to this person? Yeah. And am I really attracted to that person, or am I attracted to their blank?
Yeah.
And their blank, is that the thing that I'm missing? And that's why I think I'm attracted to them. Come on. When we start really breaking that thing down, we put ourselves in a place of spiritual and sexual freedom and liberation, because I don't have to have sex with you. I understand why I'm attracted to you. And so because I understand why I'm attracted to you, then I'm going to do this that actually satiates me to be the person that I need to be.
That's it.
So now I don't need to sleep with you for your clout, because I'm finna do these things to create my own clout. I don't need to sleep with you because you're the pastor. I'm finna study the word and be a good pastor myself. I don't need to sleep with you because you come from the family across the other side of the track.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do what I need to do. You understand what I'm saying? So when we really start breaking down what the attraction is, see, that's what we don't want to do. Because if I break down what the attraction is, and I really see what the missing link is, and I put that missing link in my life, then I'm no longer dependent on having sex.
And what it comes from my male perspective is, it comes from greed. It comes from greed. And if you think about it, as a male growing up, going back to you saying male validation, as boys growing up, in our private talks with other men, especially barbershop talks, corner talks and things like that, we were taught to pursue women. We were taught to pursue. In addition, once you get one, what's better than one? Two. What's better than two? Three. So you start practicing on how to get the next, how to get more. And that's a form of greed. So now you get into the greed and you ask yourself, what is it about this person? Is it their hair, they smell, or is it I just want to perform an act with that person? And in that act with that person, what is that act gonna do for me? Is it gonna give me the opportunity to get a better job now because she's the boss's daughter, the pastor's daughter, whatever might be the case? And you have to really ask yourself those hard questions. What would being sexual with this person do for me besides hopefully or possibly climatic end? So
See, now you're talking about the sexual appetite. This is what we're discussing. Yeah. There is a particular thing called a sexual appetite. We know that there's a such thing called sexual appetite, but we don't know where it comes from.
Exactly.
We think that it's just, this is what I like. No, it's based on your psychological and emotional deficiencies.
Yeah, that's
actually. And so what's happening is you're lusting. You're not lusting for that person. You're lusting for what that person can give you. You're lusting for the pat on the back. You're lusting for the all the homeboys say, "Ooh, you got her, man." You're lusting for the social gratification. You're lusting for everything it is except the commitment of recognizing that you are spiritually intertwined with someone in a way that it cannot be detached.
Yeah. And they call that a soul tie. Some book say, I forgot the author, the guy who wrote the book on soul ties. And I think I even used that one as one of my reference to in writing. But when you think about the desire for that, and you think about who we are as people, I stated how we were taught to pursue and chase. No one teaches how to stop, how to not pursue. Men are not taught that. You have to learn that on your own. And a lot of times you learn that through hurting somebody. You learn that from possibly a disease, getting someone pregnant that you didn't plan to get pregnant. So, and then it used to be a time you got older and you couldn't do it no more. Now we're in a society that we have medication for almost everything. And you think about that. So what is that doing to our world? What is that doing to our community? This whole COVID thing, you would think COVID would have stopped childbirth. But people say there have been pandemic babies, there have been pandemic weddings and marriages, there have been pandemic divorces because people found out that they weren't compatible anymore. It's just been so much stuff that's going on, and people don't see it from a spiritual perspective.
Right. And our ability to shift and looking at all of these things, like you're saying, we got the divorce in our community running rap. What is it? Is it 79% now?
7.
You
See,
know,
I know it's in 7s. I didn't know the number. I know it's at least 7.
You know, we got we got abortion, 1 out of 4. We got rape and molestation, 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff, you know, and we're not addressing it in church. And even to your point with these soul ties, once we are able to honestly, with credible reference, address these issues in church, in a safe space, in a space of affirming, in a space of validating one's divinity. When we're able to have these conversations and all of those tenets are in place, it's going to be a beautiful time in God's church.
It is. And I think what's going to happen, I'll say, God, I can't think of the guy's name, but, you know, we have a movement now where people are leaving the church and they not trusting organized religion, they're not trusting pastors, and they still call themselves Christians or spirits and things like that. And I understand that, and I understand why, because they're not feeling as though they're getting what they need from the organized church structure and the traditional of religion. So what we have to also do now is give them a space to communicate that's safe. And with technology, you could have a text group where they could be anonymous and they just submit a text or submit in a chat group these questions. And hopefully you have leaders who are able to answer. And if you can't answer it, be honest enough to say, I don't know the answer, but let me reach out to someone and see, can we come up with the answer the next time we get together?
That's spiritual growth. So you have to be in a particular place of spiritual maturity to tell somebody you don't know.
Yeah. When
you can't be based on your ego doing that type of work, brother. You got to truly be liberated in Christ to say, I don't know, let me get back with you on that. That's the top
when
of the
I
game.
tell you, that was so liberating for me to start being able to say, I don't know the people. And what's so unfortunate about that, when I say I don't know, people assume I'm trying to be using false humility, or they think I don't want to tell them, because when you get DR in front of your name, people just assume that you know stuff that they're going to ask you. And there are a lot of stuff I don't know. And I don't mind telling people I don't know.
And that's beautiful. It's beautiful for you. It's beautiful for you to admit that. It speaks volumes about your character, your confidence, and your commitment to Christ.
Yeah. And, you know, and I say that because I could say this and go on record. I don't mind doing it everywhere. My goal is to finish strong and receive my eternal reward that's been promised to me. And I said, and even if by chance I find out that I've been bamboozled, hoodwinked, led astray, I'd rather die being fooled than to die unbelieving or not knowing or not trusting and find out that it was true.
Listen, I'm gonna fulfill my purpose regardless. You know, it was I was 15 when I started this work. I worked for a grant, Department of Children and Families, or I think it was an HIV prevention grant actually. And I was chosen as a teenager to do condom demonstrations to other Black women, because what the word that came out was that the #1 population who was contracting the disease was, at that time, it was Black women between the ages of, I think, 15 and 23. And so they chose a group of people, and I was one of them. You know, so being a teenager, tasked with the responsibility to teach other teenagers and sex workers the importance of wearing condoms, really opened my eyes during the height of the HIV era, because there were people who was not going to use them.
Yeah.
Not because they wanted to be sick, but because one sex worker demanding that you use a condom with her means that she's not going to get that sale. Yeah. Because there's going to be another sex worker that says you don't have to. Yeah. So instead of me protecting my body and doing what I need to do, I'm doing what I feel like I have to do at the time. And that right there is what my work is hinged on. Black women who make immediate decisions because out of desperation, versus those who are able to be informed, aware, validated, and backed in making their decisions. And those are two different groups of people.
And that is so true, especially when you think about it from the female perspective, doing what you have to do sometimes.